Crews are working all around this area, taking a look at what is going on there, trying to find, of course, any survivors. Residents are there still struggling to comprehend what happened in downtown Manhattan. Well, CNN's Garrick Utley is in New York. He is joining us once again now with a view from there. Garrick.
Thank you, Jim, and also joining you with a question about vocabulary, about the words we use in our life. And the question is, what is the most attention-grabbing three-letter word in the English language? Well, many people will say, obviously, it's sex, but we're not talking about sex right now because the close runner-up is no doubt war, W-A-R. This word war is in the air all the time right now in our broadcasts, in Congress, the president's visit to New York today. The reservists are being mobilized, tens of thousands of them. Congress has passed a resolution authorizing President Bush to take whatever needed action he deems fit. But what is this war going to really be?
For a president who would lead a new war, what happened here was more important than any congressional resolution. The voice of the people giving George W. Bush a mandate to do whatever is necessary to avenge what happened here.
I can hear you!
No leader can take a nation into war without the backing of its citizens. That backing is there. Still, a CNN Time poll released Thursday shows the dilemma facing the president and the people. When asked whether Congress should declare war, 62% said yes. But then, when asked against whom Congress should declare war, 61% said they weren't sure. That uncertainty gives President Bush flexibility and time to determine what kind of a war he intends to wage. The obvious victory in this war would be to capture or kill Osama bin Laden. Of those asked in the CNN Time poll, 81% said they supported the assassination of terrorist leaders. But bin Laden is a moving, hidden target, as was seen following the involvement of his terrorist organization in the bombing of 2 American embassies in East Africa 3 years ago. Cruise missiles were duly launched against terrorist camps in Afghanistan. They hit their targets, but not bin Laden, which raises the prospect that what may start as a war against Osama bin Laden will evolve into something similar to the war on drugs. As with terrorism, it's not a war against a country, but rather a fight against shadowy individuals and their networks. The United States sends financial support and agents to South America to fight drugs at their source. It tries to guard its borders at home. Occasionally, a leader of a drug cartel is captured and extradited to the United States. Still, it is a war with neither victory nor defeat. It just goes on. In the wake and grief of Tuesday's trauma, it is too early to see clearly where, when, and how this war will be fought. That decision is up to the president, backed by the nation, to choose not only the time and place of the next battle, but also the weapons.
Those weapons, no doubt, will include guns, cruise missiles, airplanes, but also the latest technology to intercept communications among terrorist groups, intercept their phone calls. They love to use cell phones, for example. There'll be the weapons of economic sanctions to be imposed against those countries which have supported or at least shelter terrorists like bin Laden. Also the weapons of diplomacy to create alliances and coalitions to put political pressures on these nations. It all adds up to a very large arsenal, and the question, of course, is when will it be used and how will the weapons of this arsenal be used? Jim?
What is your sense there, Garrick, of the patience that the president talked about, of choosing the time and the place to act?
Obviously, I think a lot of slack is going to be cut by the American public. They know the president is now committed himself to really carry out what public opinion wants. We want action here in the United States. The polls show that quite clearly. But there's a very interesting and very delicate balancing act. On the one hand, as we said, the president has to have the support of the people. He has that. At the same time, that support can put pressure on the president to act before he is ready to do so. So my guess, it's only a gut feeling, I think other people who have been studying the situation might share this, we're probably talking about a few weeks, perhaps a month or so at the most, before some kind of initial sharp action is taken, probably using military weapons themselves. But then this war is going to perhaps become a longer campaign, the long slog that may never end in a victory or a defeat. It will simply go on. Jim?
All right, Garrick Utley there in New York, and we'll be back with Garrick a little bit later. Here is an update now on some of the latest developments. A man has been arrested in New York in connection with Tuesday's attacks. This is the first arrest directly connected to the ongoing investigation. The Justice Department saying the man is a material witness in the case. In Pennsylvania, search crews recover the cockpit voice recorder from the hijacked United Airlines flight. Authorities are hoping it will reveal key details about the plane crash. The recorder is said to be, in the words of one official, fairly good shape. U.S. President George W. Bush thanked rescuers in New York for their continued efforts. Mr. Bush got a first-hand look at the destruction for himself on Friday. Rescuers have been working non-stop since the attacks. About 4,700 people are still believed to be missing since the World Trade Center collapsed.
And across America and overseas, Friday was a day of mourning. CNN's Bruce Morton has more on our collective grief.
Church services everywhere. America's leadership was at Washington's National Cathedral, but services everywhere. Cleveland, Ohio.
We mourn for the many lives lost in a tragedy that remains etched in our minds forever.
Boston, Massachusetts.
Look with compassion on the whole human family, and especially on those who lost their lives this week.
Sweet hour of prayer, sweet hour of prayer.
At the Pentagon, where many lost fellow workers and friends.
May God comfort all of you that are in loss today, and may we wait on Him and renew our strength.
Manchester, New Hampshire. An Islamic service in Sterling, Virginia, near Dulles Airport.
When people accuse you of being terrorists, this is because this is what they were told.
Austin, Texas.
Banish the violence that has been in our midst and the evil that exists around us.
Back at Washington's National Cathedral, the Commander-in-Chief.
This conflict was begun on the timing and terms of others. It will end in a way and at an hour of our choosing.
That service ended with a hymn, a battle hymn. Bruce Morton, CNN, Washington.
Stand by. And you know, we keep hearing accounts of acts of bravery, acts of astounding bravery in some cases. On Friday, our Larry King spoke to U.S. Solicitor General Ted Olson about the loss of his wife, Barbara. She was on board the plane that crashed into the Pentagon. She made 2 telephone calls to her husband.
I think she must have been partially in shock from the fact that she was on a hijacked plane. She absorbed the information. We then both reassured one another this plane was still up in the air, this plane was still flying, and this was going to come out okay. I told her it's going to come out okay. She told me it was going to come out okay. She said, "I love you."
And he says that at one point, Barbara asked him what she should tell the pilot of the doomed plane to do. Olson was a 45-year-old lawyer who often appeared on CNN and other networks as a commentator, known for her conservative views and her big heart. Well, Larry King also spoke to Michael Hingson, a blind man who worked on the 78th floor of the first World Trade Center tower that was hit. He paid tribute to his guide dog, Roselle, for saving his life.
She did a tremendous job. She's from Guide Dogs for the Blind, which is one of the larger schools in the country that trains these dogs. They do an incredible job of selecting the animals, doing the best that they can to acclimatize them to a lot of adverse conditions. This clearly can't be one of them, but she knows how to cope with noises. She knows how to cope with a lot of different stressful things. So she played guide down the stairs.
She did on that day. Hinkson and his dog actually escaped through the lobby, and then they took shelter in a subway just as that building started to collapse. Jim?
If you're in a military family at this time, if you are in the military reserves in the United States, there is a lot of discussion underway right now about the U.S. Defense Department and its decision to call up tens of thousands of reservists. Let's get more on that by going to the Pentagon, where our Mark Potter is standing by. Mark?
Well, Jim, as that reserve call-up is being put into place, workers here at the Pentagon building itself are still out there tonight, as they have been for several nights, working under floodlights in the rubble, going through the debris, looking for the remains of victims, trying to shore up the building, looking for evidence that can be used by the FBI as it tries to build its case. The toll now, the estimated death toll here is 189 people, including the 64 who died on the plane that hit the building on Tuesday. Officials say a third of the Pentagon has been knocked out of commission by the blast, the fire, the smoke, and the water damage. And what we are seeing here are some pictures that were shot earlier in the day of the damage, the very extensive damage to this building. Officials here say the repair to this building could take years, the cost anywhere between $100 million and $1 billion. And some of the people working on the scene have been talking about what they have been seeing in there, and it's been quite disturbing.
Think of your worst nightmare of a building that's been pummeled, just complete destruction. Everything's just knocked down, torn apart, ripped up. The casualties are in there. It's pretty much the worst thing you can imagine to see.
Now, the Pentagon says it will soon activate some 35,000 reservists to help shore up defenses at the nation's ports and also to assist the fighter pilots who have been flying combat air patrols or who have been on standby at 26 bases around the country. The reservists will be called up from their civilian jobs, and among those who will be called, we are told, will be engineers, doctors, military police, air defense, and intelligence specialists. Now, at a news briefing earlier, the Army Secretary said that after the terrorist attack, Americans emerged from that experience stronger and with a greater resolve to fight back.
Tuesday, September the 11th, has already been described in various newspapers and publications as the darkest day in American history. I would only say to our adversaries that I would warn to watch carefully, for you are about to see our finest hour in the future.
Now, Pentagon sources say on the day of the terrorist attacks, at least 4 Air Force jets scrambled to try to intercept some of the hijacked passenger jets that crashed into the World Trade Center and into the Pentagon. But we were told that the jets just never got there on time. Air Force officials say there was never any discussion about actually shooting down those civilian jetliners. Again, they pointed out that the fighter jets were never in close enough proximity to actually do that. Jim, back to you.
All right, Mark Potter, the latest there from the Pentagon. Well, Washington is seeking international help, of course, as it considers how best to retaliate for Tuesday's terrorist attacks. In particular, the U.S. government focusing on Islamic nations with links to the prime suspect, Osama bin Laden. We get more on that now from Andrea Koppel.
If, as the U.S. suggests, Osama bin Laden was the mastermind behind Tuesday's attacks, going after him and shutting down his al-Qaeda terrorist network will require more than just a military assault on Afghanistan. That's because over the years, al-Qaeda has become an international network with cells rooted in almost every region of the world. That's why Secretary of State Colin Powell has put the world on notice. The United States needs help.
I am not threatening so much as I am saying this has become a new benchmark, a new way of measuring the relationship and what we can do together in the future.
Since Tuesday, Powell has had the world on speed dial, in particular reaching out to countries where the U.S. says Islamic militant groups have links to bin Laden's network.
Once these people have been trained in Afghanistan, we know that they've gone to Africa. We know that they've gone to Asia. We